it's easy, or would you like it?
He'll taste it and he'll tell you. Is that a good texture? Yeah?
Am I sitting in you're comfortable feeding from that angle?
Yeah. That's my angle all the time in restaurants too.
So we will watch for what we want to do is make sure the swallows occurred, because what people do sometimes is they'll push the bolus back into the throat area and it'll sit here.
Pockets it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But then if we had another one, it starts to do what we call a boxcar effect. So we just want to watch that elevation of the... How was that one? Good? Well, there's where we get to hear your voice. And I like that you mostly have your chin down looking here, because that's a much more airway protective posture. Yeah.
So we have been encouraged in the past to, just put a little bit of soft, not pressure, but just a reminder on the top of his head to remind him to keep his head in that chin tucked in so that he's not, when he is swelling, doing this, right, to the side. But he doesn't really like that, so I don't know.
To the side is not even as bad as we just don't really want the chin up.
Yeah.
Because I remember, normally I would go over a normal swallow, but we're kind of getting right into this. But in the normal swallow, this little space here between the tongue base and the epiglottis, called the vallecular space, okay, sometimes if we have a little bit spilling, it can go in here. Okay, so if this is the epiglottis and this is the tongue base and this is that little space right here, something comes over the tongue, it can go here a little bit. When we put our head up, we close that off, which is why if you do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, you got to raise the victim's chin first, because we want a direct route from mouth to mouth, from mouth to throat into trachea. We don't want that for swallowing. So conversely, if we tuck the chin, we maximally have this capacity at its maximum. So a chin tuck posture is more airway protected. It also tucks the top of the trachea further under the tongue base, because the tongue moves back a little bit, so the trachea is more under the tongue. Like there's lots of reasons why you try to have, and so you've probably been to feeding courses where they seem to say, don't stand over someone that you're feeding, because when they look up like this to get the spoon,
Right.
we want to be bringing the spoon from below to encourage that chin down posture just to come for the spoon. So that's good.
Do you want to try the lasagna?
Is that this one? So we'll have to say, I know it's going to be hard to say texture or taste. We're just talking texture at the moment. Which one do you think is more comfortable? Oh, your voice sounds great. Your voice is sounding good.
You ready? We'll talk about that in a minute, right? Chin? No, look over here. Thank you.
So you would this is probably because of, some of the spasticity, but if you bring the spoon closer and let Chris just come over it, like he's got a real reach there. If it's a little bit closer, that he doesn't have to reach that far, is it a problem that it will come?
Go closer, you mean?
Yeah, just wait till is that one gone?
Nope. He knows. Is that too thick, Chris? Yeah. Too thick? Do you want me to soften it up more? Yeah. So, do you want to do the stewing beef? And then I'll soften that up with a little bit of milk.
So So is this just for me to see the different types of food? Do you eat all this every meal?
The last week when you didn't show up, I had all 3 different meals.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay, you ate all 3 of them.
It's just regular.
Oh, you can
Yeah,
thank me later then, Chris.
Yeah, he ate all of it. All 3 bowls.
Dear.
So is that too far of a reach then when he's extending?
Well, I mean, he's like
Or-
really reaching, like
Yeah.
I would just think, it's nicer to try to bring the spoon to the lips and have the person come forward, but I understand it's a little bit harder for Chris to, yeah. But if he's already at the extension getting it, then he's relying on you to put it in, and then you're the one in control of when he pulls it. Like, it's just a control thing, we try to have it so that it's brought to the lips where he can come forward and take it himself. It's also been many years that you've had a
Yeah,
relationship with
yeah.
feeding, so it's not something that changes in a heartbeat,
Yeah,
you know, and it's just something to consider.
yeah. That's fine. No. I think him and I have a rapport.
When you're finished that bite, how about you let me hear your voice after you swallow?
He'll tell me usually. Can you tell him show
Can
your
you,
voice?
yeah. Can you do an all?
No, we did a cough
Oh.
instead. She asked for your voice.
Or do you need to cough? You need to say or ah,
He's gonna try and finish what he's got in his mouth.
and that's good.
So I think the more support we can give him when he's eating, the better, right? So the more if he needs some lateral support, then we'll add some lateral support. We do have a headrest that he doesn't like.
You're
We
looking
just got
for
a new
insert.
seat back, but it doesn't have any attachment for the headrest.
Yeah, I think
You want a cough?
that's just a cough. Yeah, I think that's.
Want a cough? Yeah, I'll get you a drink after you cough. Did you need to cough? You're not coughing, you're sucking it in.
Yes, I need to, but.
What do you want, the insure?
I also think people maybe need to slow down. Yes.
What did
And the
you
other
say,
interesting
Stacy?
things around usually
The glass on the spoon.
Nellie puts it to the side of the straw.
And he'll be sitting in his chair.
My God, the straws are gone.
Standing
Really
and
hard.
Claudia was mentioning
Cardboard.
a lot of the meds. don't
Well,
let
there's
you get
metal
this
straws.
See?
because
Metal
it's
straws.
all over, so.
Metal straw
I
here.
think people
Of
are
his
too
teeth.
much.
Okay, so can you pull that out? So that's a little cough. So I. What happened?
Because he doesn't like to stop.
I know, that was my fault. I called that. Blame me. So, okay, so let's think about this. So a cough
Yeah.
is a response to a little bit that's gone the wrong way, and then we cough to try to blow it out of the trachea here.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also still trying to drink. So we're not organized in our airway protection for swallowing when we're also coughing.
Mm-hmm.
So we really don't, we want to stop if we notice a bit of a cough, even though we won't be happy with that maybe. Blame Jane. But
Blame Jane.
you know, that's gonna be something else that we'll reduce. Okay, so now that sounds like
That's
a
a
wet
reflux.
birth.
Yeah, that was like a yeah.
That's one of his reflux,
Yeah, for sure.
right?
So if he's drinking his own shore and he's coughing,
Stop.
sometimes I have to like literally take the straw out of his mouth.
Yeah, you will.
Yes,
You
'cause
will.
he'll keep going.
Yeah.
And that feels awkward to do that, right?
Yes.
Because he's wanting to drink.
Yes.
But on the other hand, you're doing what's best for him.
Yeah, and you know what? It's just explaining. And I
Yeah.
think if we all know the reason why, right? So hopefully you don't have another pneumonia or not as soon.
So the other thing, Jane, is that he drinks a lot on his own. So he'll be in his room, or he does it at home. He did it at home for years, but he would just sit with his drink on his table, and he'd just drink at his leisure, which is typically the whole thing. But So there's not, I guess my point is there's not always someone right with him when he's drinking
Yeah.
to take it away.
And again, this is what, I mean, the reality is that there's gonna be repetitive, recurrent pneumonia. We just wanna see if we can increase the gap.
You're doing great, Chris.
Don't even go there, don't even go there.
I need to update
Who's he
this,
pointing
don't
at?
we?
Mm.
Now
Oh,
that Allison's
perfect.
here. No, Meredith.
Oh, Meredith?
Wednesday.
So the other
Meredith
thing
and-
is-
yeah, we had a meeting Friday.
It's probably gonna be really annoying, but I'm just gonna do this for 1 second because when you're eating and swallowing, it's kind of the most important thing that you have to do in that moment. And so if we're distracted, if the TV is on, or there's lots going on, or you're trying to communicate something, harder to focus on the task. That was mean, wasn't it?
You
Is
want
that
the
gone
lasagna?
now?
He's like, I'll go to
lasagna
this
first?
side.
You want a couple spoons of lasagna? No, what do you want? You want
Wants to
some more of
talk
this
about-
one?
So how was the ensure? Was it
Finished.
okay? I'm just gonna see if he'll say something for me. Okay, good. Good.
Is that an appropriate quantity, that amount on the spoon?
Well, I never put much more than that on the spoon. 'Cause
What we want to be able to make sure is that he can swallow what's on the spoon in that
Yeah.
first kind of 3 swallows, that it disappears in that third, so he's not like we were talking about, it's not sitting back in there with the, and we just keep adding more
And
to
then,
it.
yeah, and that he has swallowed. So one of the things that can help sometimes with triggering a more timely swallow initiation.
Mhm.
And I can't tell, you might already be doing it, but if we put a little bit of pressure on the with the bowl of the spoon on the tongue, just a little bit of downward pressure, it sometimes triggers the swallow a little bit faster.
Oh.
And it also increases, the oral awareness and all those things.
I gotta find new tongue, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah, right,
You
exactly.
don't let us see that tongue very often
I
until
know.
you don't want it.
Like that was good. That was perfect in terms of Chris, you coming forward, and now I would just say, I'm so picky, but maybe if we held the spoon just slightly lower.
Lower?
Yeah, and to come forward. Just that will, see? Can be close but low. Yeah.
So we don't want him reaching out,
Well,
right? We don't want him, so kind of try to put it in an
Yeah.
area where he's,
where he's
Doesn't have to move too
controlling,
much.
yeah.
You can do that. Gotta listen to what she says.
And so again, like this is a pattern. He puts his lips to it, you put it in.
Yes.
So that's the expectation. So it would be a big difference to have this.
She's gonna struggle with that.
sorry, but I'm watching.
So of the 3 different meals, what did you think you liked best? Oh, the ensure? Oh, don't tell the cook that.
Okay, so which one do you want out of these?
I think this was made a little runnier. I just wonder
Yes.
if he
Oh, you wanna
notices
try
it.
it?
Well, just if Chris,
If you notice
Chris
it?
notices
Oh,
the
you didn't want
difference.
to try it, that's why.
Oh,
All right, Chris.
I think Mama added
Try
some
a
milk.
little bit of lasagna and see.
Okay, so call.
Yes.
All right.
We done coughing? You sure? Need to cough some more. No.
So it almost looked like that, whether that was a coincidence or not, but that the more the sort of the denser puree seems to
Yeah,
be
what
less.
we've always found is if something's a little thinner and it has any kind of like a texture, a hamburger, a little bit of a grainy,
Yeah,
he'll cough more on that than he would something that's thicker.
Okay.
you want to do some Pepsi.
Has Jane seen you had pop yet?
Here we go.
Let's just see what he does independently there with that.
When would, Chris, when would you normally have pop?
All day long.
I think we all
Here's
just
a
got.
loaded question, Jane.
And is it cola?
Yeah, Pepsi.
Pepsi, 0.
Or
What does that mean?
caffeine-free Coke.
No sugar.
Yeah, because a couple of things, when we're just thinking about the reflux thing, caffeine actually relaxes the lower esophageal sphincter and can promote reflux. But effervescence also creates that, burp and pressure, so you're more likely to. So what I was wondering is if maybe it wouldn't, maybe the effervescent drink would maybe be not with a meal or not so close to a meal when there's lots of stuff that could. I mean, I'm just shooting out ideas.
No,
You
it's
guys go
good.
ahead.
That's great.
You know how you stir the bubbles out of ginger ale and things before?
You flatten it?
Yeah, flatten it. Is that something
Well,
that could be done
if
with?
yeah.
Or would Chris drink it?
Yeah.
That would be the question, right?
Open,
And see, the other
open
thing he
tomorrow's
does,
can now.
I'd like you to see what sometimes happens with the pop, especially if it's kind of that initial drink of pop, a can of pop. He'll put his head back to keep it in his mouth, and I think that's that fizz and foam, right? So he's back, going head forward, head forward, head forward. Then he'll bring his head down, and then so that's I don't know what's happening then, but I really I wish I could get you to see
I'll
that.
put some more in there, put it in this cup holder, and let's see what happens. Can we do that? I want to put a little bit in there.
Oh.
Didn't want him to finish it all in one shot.
He's a big pop drinker, like big.
Whoa.
Yes, I'll give you some of that in a minute.
Oh.
You want more? Oh, he's pulling.
Girlfriend? Colleen? Oh, Monica. Yes, she'll be there on Friday. On Saturday.
Monica Arbor?
Yeah.
Ooh, very high.
Yes, I know.
Can we also try straightening the straw a little bit? I'm just curious with the straight straw. Can we try it in upside down?
Yeah. You need just for the Pepsi?
Oh, I just want to, okay, see?
He'll bend it at the,
Oh, okay, because he's used to the bend.
yeah.
It seemed easier to get his mouth on it though, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. It wasn't.
You did.
So it's going to become more predictable if it's straight. It's also with a bendy straw, you can kind of be up a little bit when you have a drink, but with a straight straw, you can't. You've got to bring your head down into that posture that is more airway protective. Yeah. We hate or bendy straws.
Oh, you
Speech
do,
pathologist.
See, and he hates
You don't
straight
like it.
straws.
Yeah.
He always gets mad if I give him a straight
I
straw.
hate paper straws.
Oh, paper straws are the worst.
Oh, yeah, they
So
are.
you like paper straws, Chris?
So the metal straw, he won't bend if he gets a metal straw. Like if you get a
Yeah.
permanent straw, and then he might find that less annoying. Oh, you said he can't use metal because of what? Bites it?
He bites
Okay.
Well, can you get the little ends?
with the
Have you
plastic.
tried that?
You know what, guys, I would be afraid that little end would
Would come off?
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
'cause it's too
also-
small.
There's also reusable plastic straws.
Yes,
Well, I do have
A little
a
more
straight
robust.
plastic straw. Just 1 second.
You could put it in upside down too.
Yeah, and it,
No, I do have one.
and how big is it?
That's not bendable.
Sometimes they're like this,
Yeah.
and they deliver. Okay, that's not bad, yeah.
Rubbery.
See if that works.
That's really long.
Yeah,
So, yeah, this, we would want it about here.
yeah.
I'm just making it really hard for you, I'm so sorry.
Because he tucks it on the side, right? Right, Christine? He tucks the straw on the side to drink.
They've always been amazed at how he can put all of that together, the sucking, the swallowing, when he's had such a hard time swallowing. You're doing a great job, bud. You're hardly coughing at all.
I know.
And that's the thing, on another day, everything would be exactly the same.
Do you wanna try this?
Coughing and coughing and coughing. I just don't know, right, what's.
Do you wanna try?
Oh, yeah, so if Chris is in any way not feeling well, or, you know, if he has any kind of fever or anything like that, any kind of infection, even if it's a UTI, it actually changes our, when we have an infection, it changes our metabolic rate, which impacts our breathing rate. And I haven't gone over the normal swallow with you guys, but when we swallow, we close the vocal folds, so we actually have a period of apnea. And normally when we swallow, and then we go, we have an expiratory puff, so that if anything went the wrong way, it kind of puffs out. When we get into having some sort of infection, and that metabolic rate increases, and our breathing rate increases, we'll see people swallow, and then they breathe in right away. So if there's anything here, and they're not holding that apnea for very long, Oh, there's a cough.
So, yeah, you can see delayed cough like that, where, you know, it's kind of sitting there for a bit, but.
And again, is that a little bit of residue that's gone down the wrong way? So when it comes from up here, we call it prandial aspiration. And when it comes back up this way and down, we call it reflux aspiration. So we don't really know what's happening,
Yeah.
you know.
I think there's probably a little of both. For most part. So then when we do the swallow study in October, will that automatically go to you? Or do I have to
Oh,
talk
if you
to
ask Hannah
Yeah.
too, she will send it to, well, yeah, so typically,
No, before you.
so we don't know when in October, you don't know what the dates are. I'll just ask for a long, because usually I get 8 weeks, you know, as a timeline that I'm supposed to have a file open.
Oh,
And I was here to see Chris for this purpose. But I think the care coordinator will be fine if I say, can we keep it over? So I'll do, I'll put to the end of October and hope that the swallow study's being done and that I have the report and we can go over it and be in a little bit more. So if I say when week feeding Chris, consider then I'll just write all the points. I'm gonna write points. It doesn't mean it's not already happening. Like you're feeding at a really nice rate. So, you know, at a very paced rate, making sure that he's already swallowed. I'm not writing that because it's not intimating that I didn't see that, because you are doing that. I just want to make sure that, you know, everyone knows.
Yeah, because there's a lot of different people who will be doing his feeding, so it's important to have a clear
I'm gonna write that.
for the protocol, right? Okay, Hannah. Let's see, where is she?
Oh.
She's just writing some information down. That you're
Do you know any other email that would come in under, Jane, other than Hannah?
H. Collins. Try Collins.
Oh, well, to be accurate, this is normally masking.
Does that look good there, Jane? About that much?
I wouldn't put more than that on, because it won't go in his mouth.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the maximum I would put in.
And when I do it, and I've shown her, we do like a
This.
level, we do little less
Like,
than
that's
that.
probably the most I normally would put on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Anything more than that, he'll start coughing. She's just taking a
I'm
picture.
taking notes
She's still taking notes.
and taking pictures.
He's got a bone to pick with you.
Was that,
I'll just go over. Because I know she did send me weeks. This is
What? No.
Jane, can you tell me when you got the text from him?
when I got the text, well, it was after that you and I spoke, and I knew that she'd seen. Search. Okay, so I'll just orient the parts. We've got the lips and the tongue, the roof of the mouth, and the soft palate, which is the thing you can see hanging down at the back of your mouth when you say ah. Here is the epiglottis here. Here is the trachea or windpipe to the lungs, at the top of which are the vocal folds housed inside your Adam's apple. And then back here is the esophagus to the stomach, which doesn't look big enough for food to go through, but it's like a sock. It's flat when there's nothing in it, and it expands when something goes through it. At the top of the esophagus is a sphincter muscle called the upper esophageal sphincter. It's also important in swallowing. For all of us, when we're not swallowing, that is closed. When we swallow, it's told to relax, to allow food to go into the esophagus. So you know that when you put food and liquid into the mouth, we seal the lips so things don't come down the chin. We also get the soft palate here to pinch against the base of the tongue to block off the back of the mouth so things don't spill this way either. Because it isn't until we're actively swallowing that we protect the airway. So right now it's open, so we don't want stuff to spill down in, so we seal right here. So then we use the tongue to move the food between the teeth, mix it with saliva, taste it, break it down, and when we feel like it's ready for swallowing, we collect it into a puddle in the middle of the tongue, which we call the bolus. So if I said to you guys, swallow your saliva, you feel yourself suck it into the bolus on your tongue. And with the bolus sitting here on the tongue, and this the roof of the mouth, the tongue squeezes against the roof of the mouth to squish the bolus into the throat. As it does that, the soft palate moves back and blocks off the nasal cavity so we don't have stuff coming out of our noses when we swallow. But now we have a bolus, so it could be a drink here and an open airway here, so things happen extremely quickly. If we were looking down at the top of the trachea, it would be a cylindrical tube. The vocal folds are sitting at the top, so they're open for breathing, but then they close as the last protective mechanism against aspiration. If something comes toward the airway and stays above the vocal folds, we say there's been airway penetration. If it goes below, we say there's been aspiration. So the vocal folds close, and if you watch my Adam's apple, as I swallow, kind of bobs up and down. So that's this whole structure moving up and forward out of the way of the oncoming bolus. So it's kind of tucking up under the tongue base. And as it moves up and forward, it helps to open up the esophagus where we want the food to go. And as it moves up and forward, the epiglottis, which was curled up like this, inverts and acts like a big flapper over the airway. And once it's in this position, there's a smooth surface against which the back of the throat can squeeze, and the structures actually come together to push the bolus down into the esophagus. And at just the right time, the sphincter has to relax to accept the bolus, then it closes, and then peristalsis pushes everything to the stomach. In a normal swallow, that's what we want to see. Okay, so I have a website. This using this exact picture, I explain the swallow. So if anyone wanted to see a little bit better version, it is on there. So Hannah says, instead of waiting for everything to be organized, get it into that bolus and then start the swallow, for Christopher, it's starting to spill over the back of the tongue and it's heading towards the airway because we have not closed the airway yet. So then, because we're not swallowing yet, it's easy for it to get into the laryngeal vestibule, which is right here. So there's that penetration occurring. It was noted that there was no benefit to thickening fluids. So sometimes, because thin fluid moves so quickly, we thicken it just to slow the rate of flow, can be better controlled. It didn't have enough of a benefit, so there was no point in doing it, because we don't want to be then aspirating thickener. So at that time, there was an acceptance for a risk of aspiration with the puree diet and thin fluid. Brittany, you saw Brittany, I guess, at some point, and that was probably with one of the aspiration pneumonia.
Yeah, I do remember Brittany.
Yeah. Hannah said, I watched Christopher with thin fluids during initial assessment, and he seemed to do well. However, his cough response is inconsistent. So that always means that this, which is a clinical assessment, we don't know what's going on. We get a best guess. We use, did you cough? We use, how does your voice sound? Those kinds of things to inform us as to whether, to try to get an idea. So she said, I talked to Mom about repeating the MBS, modified barium swallow study, and it was decided that, and she asked to do a repeat MBS to see if anything had changed as an outpatient in October, and so waiting. I've given her some dates, but I haven't heard back. That's what she said. Yeah.
So that's it. There you go.
Oh yes, and that was the other thing. If there's a cough, right? You know, even for all of us, if we're around someone that's coughing, we don't really want to offer them a drink of water, because when we are coughing, our body is working to get that out. Our respiratory rate isn't normal. A cough is reflexive; it's not necessarily controlled. So, what we want to do, you could try swallowing saliva really hard, because what a cough is doing is it's blowing that stuff out of there, right? But then as the vocal folds start slamming together, they can become irritated. And so when we swallow, you now know that the vocal folds also squeeze together. So if you swallow hard, you squeeze them together, and it's like rubbing an itch rather than scratching it. So you get rid of that irritation by having that strong swallow.
Okay.
But if someone is actively coughing, a drink is a great idea. And I guess you guys know also raise arms, all that stuff, that we used to think. Our moms told us. Yeah, you do this, you just suck everything in. So, okay. You're looking for some Coke?
Can you tell me about,
Okay, one more spoon first.
coughing we've always been told to encourage him to cough.
Yeah.
And that coughing does not mean choking. Coughing means coughing, and choking is choking. So choking is when you're not.
Is it obstruction?
Right. So
Yes.
they're two very different things.
Yes.
Right, because there is sometimes confusion with coughing and coughing, and then it can be portrayed or be reported as being choking. But he's not choking. He's
Yeah. So he's probably had an aspiration event.
yeah.
Aspiration does not necessarily mean choking, yes. So we in terminology, we like to use the word choking to be an airway obstruction,
Right. So not breathing.
not breathing. So on x-ray, what we will see with Christopher are, material that comes down the edge of the trachea, and then it's not actually occluded, so he's still breathing. And the delay in what, so why doesn't Chris cough every time? It's because when we have, as humans, a constant stimulus, and this will work for almost all of us, or even watches. You remember when the first time you ever wore a watch, you were like, oh, this is like so heavy on my wrist, it's driving me crazy. And now you're like, did I put it on today? Right? Because you get used to a constant stimulus. If we aspirate constantly, instead of, eventually after, we become immune to the sensation. So we don't then cough unless the volume is enough to trigger, it's gone over the threshold of volume, or what we maybe had coughed before or swallowed before has descended into the trachea a little bit further to a point where we do have sensation, and then we start to cough. So that's why. So much stuff, eh? Fascinating though, the swallow, isn't it?
It is. That's what I was just thinking.
It is
The human
amazing.
body is so amazing.
It
is.
And everything opens and shuts and closes at the right time. And
Just wait. Finish your coffee. Finish the coffee.
what are you asking, Chris?
Young number
So
one.
if Christopher has a coughing episode, so what should the response of staff be? Like, is there amount of time to wait before trying
If he's
Offer
very
more
distressed. Before offering food,
yeah.
like these kinds of coughs?
to? No, when he goes into like
Sometimes
a
he
more
can't get into
significant
it,
coughing episode.
So what I would be wanting to see is that sort of his respiratory rate and everything has sort of settled back down. Because a rapid respiratory rate as well doesn't allow you to get that apnea in there that you need for the swallow and the airway protection. So just getting things back down to being settled and comfortable, yeah. I have people who get short of breath when they're going to the dining room in long-term care, and I'll say, go early, so you can get back to being at your regular resting respiratory rate before you start your meal. So respiratory rate is important when you're trying to swallow and prepare for your meal.
So you mentioned then about the temperature increase a few hours that will often after
An aspiration event.
episode. So how do we start to implement,
If there's a spike in temperature, yeah, then I would be going, because intervention is the direction of care, is it not? Yeah. So then we would want to start the intervention sooner rather than later.
right?
So it's typically the fever that would tip us off.
Yeah.
You know that this is probably going in the wrong direction. And then he will have some chest discomfort. I think twice in our history he's had true, obvious aspiration, go to the hospital and go right now because he's grunting. He's got that terrible, like it's in his lungs and it's hurting him. So
Yeah.
there is that too. But I think the fever typically is what
It's the marker.
yeah.
So you said usually a couple hours after aspirating is when you would spike a
like within
fever?
2 hours, some person can develop a fever. Now, I'm giving you all this, and apparently it's being recorded, so goodness knows what information I'm giving you that's not correct. But these are all the things that I
That it's just for the
understand.
Those are
sound.
all the things we've definitely heard.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's nothing new. No. Well, it's not that there's nothing new. It's just reiterating or reinforcing what I already know because
Okay.
what these guys don't know because they haven't been with them all this time.
Is it worth
And I
making
think that
regular?
sometimes with
Is there
Christopher, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, he can have a fever and we don't have
Hold the spoon right about like
any
here.
understanding of anything. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, like, is
Coffee,
it
I
worth
don't
doing
know
more
that.
regular tech, like just a
No, I
temperature
don't
check?
think so.
No?
If he gets a fever, we're gonna know it pretty quick.
Yeah, it's gonna be a bit lethargic.
Yeah.
You're gonna feel, yeah, you're probably just even with the when you're having care, probably gonna feel that he's hot.
You're doing a great job, Christopher, with all this
Thank you.
audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You are. Good job, Chris.
So, and Jay,
Yeah,
this
they're
is
down
just,
there.
it's being recorded just for the other staff. if you're okay with that. If you're not okay with that,
I
that's
didn't
okay
get that
too.
ask at the beginning.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm gonna try to write these things down. And you know, this is the strategy of having, we always call, you know, certain caregivers the champions of care because they're the people that do certain tasks with someone that goes well. Use that person as the model. That's perfect.
Yeah.
And video. But I feel like I've said so much that I wonder if I'll remember what I said to write down here. We're gonna try
Well,
to
just
get-
call us. We have it on camera.
Yeah. You want us to send it to you?
No, I don't think I want to see it.
And it doesn't have your face or anything. When you were holding up the sign, I was just
Oh, yeah, no.
zooming in on the sign.
So, but if they want to see the normal swallow, I do have a little video explaining.
Yeah, that'd be
it,
great,
and
actually.
It's on, well,
You said it's on a website?
my website's here,
Jane Groom SLP.
slp.com. I'm giving you this piece of paper, yeah.
Oh, perfect.
So what I'll do is I'll make a couple more notes, then I'll say them out loud for those of you that are here, and see if there's anything that I've missed.